On a lonely hill far from the nearest town stood a school that many people had heard about, but very few truly understood. Its name was Adebayo Hall Boarding School. From a distance, the building looked like a giant fortress watching over the land. The tall brick walls were dark and worn with age, and the iron gates at the entrance creaked loudly whenever they opened. The structure had been built many decades ago during colonial times, and its design was cold and intimidating. Students often joked that Adebayo Hall looked more like a prison than a school. But those jokes usually stopped after sunset. Because when night fell on the lonely hill, the entire place seemed to change. The wind moved through the tall grass surrounding the school, creating strange whispering sounds. The old buildings groaned softly as the temperature dropped, and the hallways seemed darker than they should have been. Many students felt it, though few spoke about it openly. There was something wrong with the school. And deep beneath the West Dormitory, there was something even worse. From the very first day students arrived at Adebayo Hall, they were given a rule. A rule that every student quickly memorized. It was repeated by teachers, prefects, and even the school guards. No student must ever enter the underground corridor beneath the West Dormitory. No one explained why. Whenever curious students asked questions, the teachers would only respond with the same words. Some rules exist for your safety. After a while, most students stopped asking about the corridor. Most students. But not Daniel. Daniel had arrived at the school only 3 months earlier. He was quiet, observant, and extremely curious. The kind of student who always wanted to understand how things worked. And the rule about the underground corridor never made sense to him. Every night, as he lay in his bunk bed staring up at the ceiling of the dormitory, the same thought returned to his mind. Why would a school forbid an entire corridor underground? What could possibly be hidden down there? The question slowly grew stronger inside his mind until curiosity became impossible to ignore. Then one night, during a violent storm, Daniel made a decision. Rain pounded heavily against the dormitory windows while thunder rolled across the sky above the hill. The lights in the dormitory slowly went out one by one as students drifted off to sleep. Soon the building was completely silent. Daniel slowly climbed down from his bunk bed. In his hand he carried a small flashlight. His heart was beating quickly, but his mind was already made up. Tonight he would find the truth. Moving quietly through the dark hallway, Daniel made sure none of the prefects were awake. The West Dormitory corridor was empty, lit only by the occasional flickering light bulb. At the end of the hallway stood the old staircase. And beneath that staircase was the door. Daniel stared at it for a moment. The metal surface was covered with rust. Thick cobwebs hung from the edges of the frame, and a large lock hung loosely from the handle. It looked ancient. Daniel slowly reached forward and pushed the door. The hinges screamed loudly as the door began to open. Daniel froze immediately, waiting to see if anyone had heard the noise. But the dormitory remained silent. Then he noticed something strange. The lock had not been locked at all. It had simply been hanging there. As if someone wanted people to believe the door was sealed. Behind the door was a narrow staircase leading down into darkness. Daniel switched on his flashlight and slowly began to descend. The air changed almost immediately. It was colder down there. And the smell was terrible. Dust filled the air, mixed with the scent of mold and something far worse, something rotten. At the bottom of the stairs, Daniel stepped into a long underground corridor that stretched deep beneath the school. The temperature had dropped sharply. His breath began to fog in front of him. And then he heard it. A whisper. At first it sounded like wind moving through the corridor. But slowly the whisper began to form words. A voice spoke softly from the darkness. You shouldn't be here. Daniel spun around instantly, sweeping the beam of his flashlight across the tunnel walls. There was no one there. His heart began pounding in his chest. Then his flashlight flickered. Once. twice. And suddenly it went out. The tunnel was swallowed by darkness. Daniel's scream echoed through the underground corridor, bouncing off the stone walls again and again. But the earth above the tunnel buried the sound. No one in the dormitory heard him. The next morning, Daniel's bed was empty. Teachers searched the dormitory and quickly made an announcement to the students. They claimed Daniel had run away during the night. But the students did not believe it. Daniel had left behind all his belongings. His clothes. His books. Even his phone. And Daniel was not the kind of person who would disappear without telling anyone. 3 students refused to accept the explanation. Musa, Tond, and Ada. Late one night, the 3 friends sneaked into the school library and began searching through the oldest archive records they could find. Dust covered the ancient books, and many of the pages were fragile with age. But what they eventually discovered made their blood run cold. Every 10 months, exactly 1 student disappeared from Adebayo Hall. Their names were quietly erased from the school records. As if they had never existed at all. Musa slowly closed the old archive book. The 3 friends looked at each other in silence. They all understood the same horrifying truth. Something was hiding beneath Adebayo Hall. Something that had been there for a very long time. And now, Daniel had awakened it.